Welcome to the Chess Angle. This is not your typical chess podcast. If you're an amateur or club-level player, the Chess Angle is for you. Our content is aimed at busy adults who are serious about the game but have limited study time. Featured guests include both amateur and titled players alike. And now, here's your host, Director of the Long Island Chess Club, Neil Bellon.
Welcome everyone to Season 7. I took a couple of weeks off, definitely needed it. I want to thank all of you for your support of the pod, all of your emails, the kind words, the 5-star reviews. It's greatly appreciated. A reminder, I do want your feedback as far as topic ideas for the show or general questions for me. You can email me directly, info@thechessangle.com, or you can use the contact link on our website, thechessangle.com. You can also leave a voice message there if you wish. Also, if you're interested in a higher level of support, we do have a Patreon page and a Buy Me a Coffee page. I'll take the second one first. The Buy Me a Coffee page is kind of a one and done type of thing. If you want to make a contribution, a one-shot deal, so to speak, to support the show, that is available. For recurring support, we do have a Patreon page. It's just $2 a month. That's US dollars, so about $25 a year. You would be supporting the show, an independent podcast, and you do get a few perks. There is early access to episodes, or some episodes at least when available. I do have a members-only blog, and something I just added, I'm going to be posting my own personal notes and outline for each episode. Not the transcript, but my own actual personal notes and outline that I detail for each episode. That'll be for Patreon members only. So if you're interested in checking either of those out, either our Patreon or Buy Me a Coffee, there are links in the show notes and on our website, thechessangle.com. So we appreciate your support and consideration for those platforms. So that being said, let's get to the content of this week's episode. So we're going to be talking about decluttering your chess study plan. This is something I've had on my mind for a while, and I want to give you some context up front, some prefacing remarks, if you will. This episode is focused on players rated around 1,000, 1,200, maybe 800, something like that, who are looking to get to Class C, which is about 1,400 US chess, okay? And maybe you're struggling to do so. Now, if you're already 1,900, let's say, and you want to get those extra 100 points to get to expert, I don't know that this episode is going to help you, but you may still want to tune in. There might be some things that you can relate to. Now, there are two ideas that form the basis of this episode about decluttering your chess study plan. First, I do believe that many players, especially those in the rating range that I just mentioned, are purchasing too many chess materials. In order to improve, you don't need to buy like 100 chess books. You don't need to join every online chess training program, which are generally behind a paywall. So this stuff does get expensive. And the second thing that forms the basis of this episode, players are studying the wrong material for their needs and for their level. They're spending time with material that's too difficult for them or with material that doesn't address their needs. So this week, we're going to Marie Kondo your study plan. Now, for the uninitiated, Marie Kondo is the decluttering lady, right? She made like millions of dollars writing books, and I think she might have a show about how to declutter. Anyway, for the uninitiated, that's who Marie Kondo is, but we're going to try to do that for your chess study plan. That being said, this episode is going to be talking points style. In other words, I'm going to be sharing some bullet points, if you will, to think about as you formulate and tweak and adjust your study plan. I'm not going to give you a list or a recipe to follow. It's not going to be step 1, read this book, step 2, buy this course. Everyone's needs are different. Except, and forgive me for mentioning this again, The Amateur's Mind, that book, Whatever You Do by Jeremy Silman, you do need to read it. The Amateur's Mind by I Am Jeremy Soman. You've heard me say this before, and I'm not going to back down from it. If you haven't read that book, or if you don't plan on reading it, I don't consider you to be a serious improver. I do not consider you to be serious about your chess improvement if you haven't read The Amateur's Mind. I genuinely feel that way. Now, moving on. In a previous episode, which was number 99, How to Approach Chess Study as a Beginner or Advanced Beginner, I'll link it up in the show notes, I did include actual resources to use, which was books and chess.com lessons. This episode is going to be more philosophical, more organizational. We're going to try to see the forest through the trees, so to speak, regarding chess study plans. So that being said, let's jump in and get to these. One other point, you do need to play as much as possible. That's so important when you're a developing player. I mean, it's important regardless of what level you're at, but especially as, say, a beginner or an advanced beginner, an improver, maybe someone who's just getting into tournaments, you need to play as much as possible, and ideally in an over-the-board or in-person situation, because playing online, it's just not the same. It doesn't have that tactile experience. And the reason I say that, a lot of the things you're going to study and that you need to work on to improve, you really need to play in order for that to be sort of embedded in your style and to make those corrections. It's one thing to read about it in a book or to think about not hanging pieces or not blundering, something like that. It's another thing to actually do it in your games, and that's where the experience comes in. So one thing that we're not going to address in this episode, because this is about the study aspect of it, is that, again, you do need to play as much as possible. And the more experience playing you have, the better a player you will hopefully become. Because if you just kind of treat this game in the abstract, if you just spend most of your time studying, but you don't really play a lot, there's not going to be a lot of transference. There's going to be a disconnect between your study time and your actual results. So one thing that's easy to take for granted, which is why I'm mentioning up front, you do need to play a lot. So always keep that in mind. With everything we're talking about today, you need to play as much as possible. But like I said, I'm going to be focusing more on the study plan aspect of things. Let's jump in and get to some of these talking points. All right, number one, how much study material should you have? How much do you need? Now, there's this school of thought floating out there. I don't know if it's a quote attributed to one person or if it's just something that people are saying. It's often said in jest, but you can argue that there's some truth to it, that the more chess books a person owns, the weaker they are as a player. Now, I don't know that that's always true. It's definitely not always true, actually, because I can think of Andy Ansel, like he's someone who comes to mind. Andy has a 15,000 plus book collection. He was on the podcast, we spoke, and he's a very strong player. So it's not always true, but yes, I know anecdotally there are many players out there with a very impressive book collection whose reading has been stagnant for years, or they'll buy a zillion online courses or books on Amazon, 5, 10 at a clip, and they see little improvement. So maybe in some cases that is true. Now, if the books are trophies on your shelf, so to speak, if it's a hobby or if you're buying them for aesthetic reasons, if it gives you joy and you have the financial means to do so, then go for it. Get all the books you want. However, for chess improvement, all you really need to do is just make sure you have all the areas of the game covered. And at this stage in your chess development, that might mean, it probably does mean, just one, maybe two sources per content area. And then you can build from there rather than run out and buy this major haul of chess material. Now, what are the areas of the game you need to focus on? When I say have all the areas covered, what am I referring to? Well, there's three main phases of the game. This is no surprise. This is sort of the no duh part of this explanation. We have the opening, the middle game, and the end game, obviously. Then you have the three main themes, so to speak, of the game, which are tactics, strategy and positional play, and chess psychology, which I'm using as a general term for things that include practical matters such as confidence, time management, and a lot of the chess psychology, that improvement is going to come from playing and experience. So nothing really earth-shattering there. So the three main phases, opening, middle game, end game, obviously. And then the three main themes, tactics, strategy or positional play, and chess psychology and practical matters. That's really everything you need to know. I'm kind of oversimplifying and generalizing, of course. We can really break this down if we want. But those are the main areas. Now, a very important comment on that. Most players, especially advanced beginners, developing players, which is the focus of this episode, they spend too much time on openings, or I should say they're studying openings haphazardly. The thing is, and longtime listeners know what I'm going to say, you need to develop a set opening repertoire with both white and black and stick with the same openings. Set it and forget it. And the reason is this is going to save you so much time because once that's set, you can spend time on the other phases above. Tactics, strategy, calculation, things that you need. Having a set opening repertoire is probably the most basic and fundamental way to declutter your study plan. Because once that's set and you're comfortable with those openings, you don't have to go crazy memorizing all these wild lines and learning new things because you're sticking with the same set of openings. And as I said, you can use that time to study other things that you need. Now, once you get to like 1800 and beyond, maybe even 1700 and beyond, whatever it is, once you start getting to that sort of higher amateur rating level, you can then start experimenting with different openings if you want, but you're not there yet. But I would say even for players 1900 to 2000, you can probably should keep that philosophy of sticking with the same openings. But if you really feel the need to experiment, I would wait until you get to about 17 or 1800, because by that point, you're competent enough as a player that you're probably not making a lot of like basic beginner tactical mistakes and hanging pieces, things like that. But if you're sort of an 800 player or a 1000 player and you're just getting into tournaments, definitely have a set repertoire and stick to it. But even stronger players, even many players who are well over 2000, they will also have that sort of stick to the same opening philosophy as well. So that's really not just for beginners. Now, I want to talk about the book, How to Study Chess on Your Own by Dvorin Kuljasevic. This book is being talked about a lot lately with the chess boom still being at play. I mean, I think it is anyway. And the rise of adults who have discovered or rediscovered the game. But I have to say, and this is just my opinion, I don't recommend it for developing adult players with limited study time, which is probably most of you listening. In other words, this book, in my view, is completely out of touch with the realistic amount of time that most adults can devote to chess. But in fairness, the author seems to have geared this toward hardcore advanced players who have a lot of time on their hands. So I don't think he really intended it for improvers with limited study time. But I'm mentioning it because every book seems to be placed in that context because adult improvers are so common now and there's sort of a resurgence of them with the chess boom. Now let's go to the book. On page 9, he says, and this is a quote, "In my view, it would be self-motivated players of any level and age who are serious and disciplined enough about their chess study and have enough time to put the methods from the book into practice." End quote. Now, most adult improvers do not have this kind of time unless you're going to neglect other essential adult responsibilities. If we jump to chapter 9, he has these charts, these weekly timetables consisting of 5 hours of study each weekday and 6 hours a day of study on the weekends. So for a total of 37 hours of chess study per week, which is insane. And here's the thing. It's not that it's a bad or poorly written book. It's actually very well written. It's that, in my view, this is, again, is for advanced players who are looking to achieve master and who have an inordinate amount of free time to devote to chess study, which 99% of adult amateur players do not. So I really think this book, as far as his study schedules, it has no bearing to reality for most adult improvers. I did a little research on the author, and he was on another podcast, and there was a question from an improver who said that, he had about 5 hours of study per week. And his response was, yeah, well, that's not a lot. And when he said that, I'm thinking, all right, in my opinion, that shows that he's really out of touch with what most amateurs can devote to chess. Now, in my view, 5 hours a week of study is a lot. For your typical adult improver, a full-time job, family, whatever it is, household responsibilities, etc. 5 hours of study is a lot. I mean, outside of playing, assuming that we're not including any kind of playing time or tournament play, 5 hours a week devoted to just chess study, I think that's a lot. I think that's a good amount. But he felt it wasn't a lot. So to wrap this up, I'm mentioning this book because every chess book is now placed in the context of adult improvers, with limited study time being the audience. That's just the assumption that's made. But it's my belief that this book is, again, for advanced players who have large swaths of free time to devote to chess. So if you fit that category, you might want to check it out. But as an advanced beginner or developing player, you will find this book overwhelming, in my opinion, and I would not recommend it if you're a player at that level, which is probably most of you. And again, to be clear, it's not a bad book. It's very well written, very well organized. I just felt compelled to emphasize that, in my personal opinion, this is for advanced players and not for your typical improver, because it is going to be very overwhelming. Talking point number 3 is the idea that players do not use chess study materials appropriately. Specifically, they study materials that are too difficult for them, and they study out of sequence. In other words, there's no scaffolding, or players study a certain aspect of the game without the proper background. For example, they'll work on memorizing deep lines of an opening, even though they're still losing most of their games because they are hanging pieces and missing very basic elementary tactical shots, and that's what they should be working on. And the truth is, with these deep opening lines and these book lines, it's probably not going to help much, because most of the time at the club, things go off book pretty quickly anyway. So it's more important that you understand themes. Now, some sort of subtopics under this idea of using chess study materials inappropriately. There's something called the sunk cost fallacy, right? That's the idea that you continue something for the wrong reason just because you invested so much time or money already. Classic example would be if you are going to a movie and you know that there's no refunds and the movie's just awful, but you're like, oh, well, I paid for the ticket. And the sunk cost fallacy is the idea that, all right, well, because I paid for it, I should sit and suffer through it because otherwise I'm losing money. But it's a sunk cost. You already spent it. So according to the theory, what you should do is just leave, because the pain that you're feeling, like of watching this horrible movie, is worse than the money you're losing. That type of thing. Or if you spent money for concert tickets and it's outdoors and it rains and there's no refund, you can say, all right, I can stay outside in the rain and watch this concert. I forgot my raincoat. I forgot my umbrella. I'm probably going to get sick, but I paid for the tickets, so I'm going to stay and suffer. Or you could just leave. And that's what the sunk cost fallacy is. So in this case, don't continue with a book or a course if you dislike it simply because you paid for it. I mean, try to get a refund or something. It's like starting a novel or something, and you start the first chapter and you're like, this is horrible. And a lot of people have this thing where once they start a book, they have to finish it. But why suffer? I mean, if it's no good, just move on to something else. And it should be the same thing with chess material. Second thing, be careful about reading a book, a chess book, because everyone's talking about it or because a GM said that he read it. What might be appropriate for one person may not be right for you. Like an example, and this is just a little, I don't know, this is one of those annoying little things with me. Like I'm hearing a lot about Dvoretsky's Endgame Manual, which is a very, very difficult and advanced endgame book. But I almost feel like a lot of amateurs are using that as a status claim, like they're almost flexing, like, yes, I am currently working through Dvoretsky's endgame manual. And I'm telling you right now, if you're a developing player, that is way beyond what you need. Like for the endgame, stick with something like Pandolfini's endgame course or Silman's endgame course or the many good chess.com lessons on the endgame. That's all you need at this point. You shouldn't be anywhere near Dvoretsky's endgame manual, in my opinion, but that sort of seems to be like a flex that people are using. It's almost like a status thing. And because that's out there in the chess discourse, doesn't mean it's right for you. So just be very careful about sort of like trendy things. Same thing with openings. A lot of people play openings because they think it's cool or it's trendy. Very common example is the Najdorf Sicilian, which is one of the most difficult and theoretically demanding openings in the repertoire. Even GMs struggle with that sometimes. They're still solving problems with that. But I think a lot of people play it because, oh, I'm playing the Najdorf. Like they want to sound cool. They want to sound hip or advanced. Whereas, the Najdorf is something as a beginner or advanced beginner, I wouldn't go anywhere near it. I mean, if you're playing other amateurs and other beginners, I guess it doesn't matter. But as you develop as a player and as you play stronger opposition, it's definitely going to become a problem. And, amateurs know that it's complicated. They know that Fischer and a lot of GMs play it. So, they want to play it too. It's sort of this mimicry thing. But just be careful of that. Don't play an opening just because you think it's cool or trendy. Play an opening because you feel it's right for you and because you're getting good games. And just remember, I don't want to turn this into a lecture about openings, but remember what the point of the opening is, because it's easy to forget. The point of the opening is to get a playable middle game. That's a quote from somebody, I forget. But I think that's the most accurate description. The whole point of the opening is to get a playable middle game. And if the opening repertoire you're choosing is not doing that, you're doing something wrong. It may be in your opening or it may be in your preparation or your tactics, but the whole point of a solid opening repertoire and an effective one is to get a playable middle game, regardless of what color. Doesn't matter if you're white or black. Don't get caught up in that. If you're going into the middle game and you're equal, slightly better, or much better on a fairly regular basis, then your opening repertoire is good. Okay, if you're playing a specific opening and you find yourself worse in the middle game, most of the time, it's two things. You either need to learn that opening better, or there's some type of maybe tactical flaw in your game, or it just might not suit your style. I guess that's three things, but you get the idea. An opening is good because you may say, how do I know if I'm playing the right opening? If you're getting middle games on a fairly regular basis, where again, you're better, slightly better, or equal, then your opening repertoire is set. That's the whole point of the opening. Don't get caught up in the whole thing like, well, if I have the white pieces, the goal is to be better out of the opening. If I have the black pieces, the goal is to equalize out of the opening. You could argue on a certain level that that's true, but on our level, okay, you just want to be at least equal. So regardless of which color you have, if you're getting to the middle game and you're at least equal, your opening repertoire is good. All right, talking point number 4 is what not to study. Since we're talking about decluttering, right? Let's talk about what not to study, or what I think is really not going to help you at this level. So if you're a developing player, I don't think these will help you. Now, as you get stronger, yes, the things I'm mentioning below, you'll likely study. But what I'm saying is you're probably not there yet. You'll get there at some point. But these are things that you want to do later on. And some of these things, even for stronger players, I'm not really sure that they're going to help at our level. So the first thing, I do feel it is a waste of time and just not helpful to review master games. Now hear me out, because that might sound like I completely lost my marbles saying that. What I mean is simply playing through master games from beginning to end, I don't think is going to help you, because number one, you're going to have trouble understanding everything. Even stronger players are going to have trouble with that. And there's not going to be any transference to your tournament games. And the second thing is there are other flaws in your game likely more basic things that need to be attended to, where reviewing master games is not going to help that. Reviewing master games is not going to really help you from missing basic tactical shots. That's going to come from experience and studying basic tactical puzzles. It's not going to help you with hanging pieces or missing a mate in one. As far as reviewing master games, you're just not there yet. It might be fun, it might be interesting, but having gone through this myself, having been at one time a player rated 1,000 who was struggling to get to 1,400, I can tell you that it didn't help me at all. I mean, I'm basing it on my own experience and other things I've heard anecdotally from other amateur players. I just don't think reviewing master games is something you should be doing at this point. That comes later. And along those lines, I don't think annotated game collections are going to help you as well. All right, Nick Weisel's probably cringing as I'm saying that. No, but I know Nick's into annotated games, but he's a much stronger player. He's like 1,700 or something like that. He might even be higher now. And at that level, that's probably fine. But if you're still struggling, to get to 1,400, the annotated game collections, it's kind of like reviewing master games. It's my contention there's really not going to be much transference to your actual tournament games, because you're going to read through an annotated game collection and then you're going to go to your OTB game and you're just going to miss something tactically or something else. So reviewing master games, annotated game collections, that comes later. The other thing I don't like, and this is probably true even for stronger players, I think this is kind of a waste, are those quote unquote composed puzzles, those sort of gimmicky puzzles where it has a position or pieces or piece configuration that you'll never see. Like it'll be something with like 3 knights of the same color on the board or something. Like you have 3 white knights versus 3 black knights. You know what I mean? Those sort of gimmicky puzzles that have no bearing on positions you'll actually see in tournaments. I think those are a waste of time. The other thing I think you don't need to spend time on is the knight and bishop mate. I know some people are going to fight me on that, and I know the argument's going to be made that, well, even if you go your entire chess career and you don't see the knight and bishop mate, you're still studying the coordination of the pieces. Maybe, but I mean, again, this isn't like a big thing that I'm, going to like argue with people about, but I just think working on the knight and bishop mate is kind of a waste, and I think the idea that you should know it is a little bit overrated. The other thing that I think you should not study or spend time on is bullet and speed chess. You're not going to learn anything with time controls that quick. You're just going to be moving pieces. That's really all you're doing. You're just moving pieces and trying not to run out of time. Bullet chess is not going to help you at this point. Now, if you want to play online, that's fine, because again, playing is important. And I know for many people, and I get this, they don't have access to an over-the-board club, or if they do, it's very difficult to get to, or they have to wait for a major tournament. Not everyone is in a situation where they have a weekly local club that's, a half-hour drive from their house, and I totally get that. So in some cases, you may not have a choice except to play online. And if that's the case, fine. Play as reasonably slow as you can so that, again, you're not just moving pieces. Use an increment and play slow enough that you at least have time to think and have some sense of what you're doing, and then review your games. But bullet and speed chess, like those 1-0 games or even those 3-0 games, even 5-0 games, you're really just kind of moving pieces. And then when you're both in time pressure, you're just kind of like, it's almost like a free-for-all. All right, but I don't think that's really going to help you at this point in your development. Which brings us to talking point number 4. How should you study? So first, let's review the essential components of a chess game that I mentioned earlier and go from there. So we have the 3 main phases of the game, obviously the opening, middle game, and end game, and then the 3 main themes of the game, which is tactics, strategy and positional play, and chess psychology, which again includes all sort of practical matters like confidence, time management. And again, I'm sort of overgeneralizing, but that's how I'm categorizing them. What I would do is pick one study resource for each phase, just one. And once you've mastered that, you can move on to something else. And many resources, as you know, cover more than one aspect of the game, so you get more bang for your buck. It's almost like a package deal. like certain chess.com lessons cover the end game, middle game, and tactics in one unit, in one lesson. Something like The Amateur's Mind, right? My favorite book. That's mainly about the middle game and strategy, but he also has a lot of material in there on psychology and practical matters. And the other thing is, okay, when it comes to, how should you study, do what you can. You don't have to juggle like 6 resources at once. So maybe you're not covering every phase at once. That's fine. Do what you can. Okay. You don't think you have to have like 4 books going at a time or like 2 books in one course. If all you can do is even just 1 book or 1 course at a time, that's fine. Do what you can. Everyone's schedule is different and things are going to come up. And if you feel overwhelmed, then you're probably studying too many things, and just scale back. Don't worry about the other guy who says, has this study plan on an Excel spreadsheet that he's posting on Twitter. Don't worry about that guy. If that doesn't work for you, you do what you can. Now, here are some examples. I know I said I wasn't going to get into specific materials, but I just want to give at least a quick example. A lot of these I mentioned in past episodes, but they're very good sources. So like for your opening, like what does this look like, what I'm saying? For your opening, let's say you play the Caro-Kann against e4. That's what you've decided. You might want to get something like Starting Out the Caro-Kann, the book by Everyman Chess. Okay, I think their Starting Out series is fantastic. For tactics, you might want to check out the chess.com lesson, Introduction to Tactics. That's an excellent first resource for tactical work. For strategy or the middle game, I won't mention The Amateur's Mind because I know I've said it a lot. Even though that one's a good one, you could also use something like Winning Chess Strategies by Yasser Seirawan. That's my other go-to for the middle game besides The Amateur's Mind. For chess psychology and practical matters, you might want to pick up Chess for Tigers by Simon Webb. Again, all things I've mentioned before. And then you can also look for sort of a hybrid or a package deal, which cover more than one aspect of the game. Something like Endings, Openings, A Taste of the Middle. That's a chess.com lesson, which covers just that, endings, openings, and a little bit of the middle game. If you're really busy, maybe just pick one thing, say, okay, all I have time for right now is this one chess.com lesson or this one book. You do what you can. I'm not into really timetables and specific things because, like spend 10 minutes on this. Because the thing is, there's 2 things with that. Number one, that's not going to work because it's what book was that? I read something recently. It was a productivity thing, or I heard something where a lot of times when you create these structured schedules, people don't end up sticking to them. So I'm not a big fan of those. Now, that being said, that's just me. If creating a very structured plan works for you and you stick to it, maybe you have that kind of personality or that's just how you work, then go for it. But I know if I try to do that, I have kind of a study plan I try to stick to, but I don't really write anything down or sort of map out or clock how long I'm studying because it's just not going to fit into my life. And I'm sure it's the same for you because every day you wake up, you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know what's going to come up. That's how life works. So I'm not really into this sort of regimented study plans like, okay, I need to finish this book by this week or, by July, 30th, I'm going to have finished, this many tactical puzzles. If I do something like that, I'm just going to stress myself out. It's not going to happen because I have other things going on. But you need to kind of tailor it for what works for you and your schedule. So at any rate, this was more philosophical, just some ideas about studying and some things that I think will help and some things that I think are not necessary. Disclaimer with this whole episode, as with everything on the podcast, this is just my own opinion based on my own personal experience and things I've seen at the club with other players, just kind of sharing. I don't want to sound like I'm telling you what to do. I'm simply sharing my opinion. So these are some ideas for you to think about. And of course, you can adjust them based on your own outlook and based on your own needs. That will do it for this week. And remember, your chess studying should be fun. It should be rewarding and worthwhile. You should enjoy the process. That's important. I want to emphasize again, don't feel you need to do everything at once. But yes, you do need to put the time in and be consistent if you want to improve and get to, say, 1,400 and above, or whatever your goal is. Thank you so much for listening. And as always, I hope you win your next game. Have a great day, everybody.